Hello, everyone. Dr. Anna Cabeca here on Couchtalk, a intimate place for intimate conversation, shamelessly and guiltlessly. And so, have you ever experienced digestive irritation, reflux, gastroesophageal reflux, or GERD for short? Any bloating, abdominal bloating, trouble digesting, gas, belching experiences? Have you been on an antacid for a long time? Have you struggled with hormonal balance or fatigue and, find it difficult sleeping and getting your energy back or weight optimized? Well, today I have a guest, Jenn Malecha, who is going to be speaking about these very topics. She is an expert, and she's someone I met through Mindshare, introduced by JJ Virgin, and has been in this space for a long time. She has her own personal journey that really helped her up level what she's doing now, and she's known as the Holistic Health Boss, and that's actually her website, Holistic Health Boss. Great website, right? So I'll tell you a little bit about Jenn. She really works with coaching and helping health-minded professionals take back control of their health by giving them access to the right lab test and resources so they can find the missing pieces of their health puzzle and actually fix what is wrong and get back to feeling like themselves again. She's using over a decade of personal training experience and training in functional diagnostic nutrition and transformational coaching, and creates personalized health rebuilding programs for clients that are realistic and sustainable for long-lasting results, and that empowers clients to be the boss of their own health. She runs a fabulous program. She's on Facebook as the Holistic Health Boss, as well as on Instagram as Holistic Health Boss. So Jenn, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Yes. I'm excited about our conversation that we're going to have today and what we can share with your listeners.
I am too. I was telling Jenn before we started, for our listeners, like, I've been stalking her. She's putting out some great information. She's just really, really and positive and inspiring in your coaching and your lingo. And I look for that when I bring on a guest, number one, and also, in my friend circle for sure.
Yes. I mean, I think that's so important because no matter where you are in your health journey, it can be really daunting at times. But, I like to say that, people like us are in the business of making the impossible possible, right? And that there is a solution out there for you. There is hope no matter what your situation is. And it's all about just finding the right information and resources, which is something that I think both of us, tend to specialize in when we work with people, or the information we're putting out there. And once you find those right things for you, like, you can take back control of your health and you can live your fullest life. So.
Absolutely. Well, tell us about your journey and what got you started here, your personal story.
Yeah. So, I've always kind of been involved in the health and fitness industry, like, since a young age. Like, I grew up playing sports, and my parents had a garden, and, always kind of taught us to eat healthy. And when I went off to college, I decided to study fitness, nutrition, and health so that I could go out and impact the world in a positive way. And when I got into college is when I first really started, like, having health problems. And actually, even before then, looking back at when I started my menstrual cycle, for example, I was that typical classic case of painful irregular periods, put on birth control at the age of 16, and I was on it for 17 years because I just didn't know any better. And then when I got into college, I started dealing with, suffering from chronic fatigue. I didn't know what to call it then. I was just absolutely exhausted and tired all the time. I had seasonal allergies that popped up when I'd never had those before, that were worsening year over year. I would get terrible ear infections that would just wipe me out for days or weeks at a time. And I was getting migraines. And then ultimately, when I was 26, I was diagnosed with skin cancer at a really young age. And there weren't any really clear risk factors for me. Like, there was no history of skin cancer, any related cancers in my family. I was not a chronic sun tanner. I mean, I live in San Diego, but I wasn't going out to the beach and lathering myself up with baby oil and just frying in the sun or something like I remember my mom doing. And so it really kind of forced me to look at my health in a different kind of way. And, leading up to that point, I was always, quote unquote, the healthiest person that everybody knew. I was a personal trainer. I was eating healthy, like, chicken breast and broccoli all the time type of meals. And when I would go to the doctor for my annual physical, they would always tell me that I was the picture of perfect health, like my blood pressure, cholesterol, all those, vital markers that they use looked perfect. And so the skin cancer diagnosis really inspired me to dive deeper, to get into this area of functional diagnostic nutrition, which is kind of the realm of functional medicine, and do some testing on myself to look at things on a deeper level. And what I found were some pretty significant hormonal imbalances. My cortisol rhythm was all over the board. My sex hormones were absolutely tanked from being on birth control for so long. I had H. pylori, overgrowth, going on in my gut, which I found was linked to the migraines that I was having. And oh, by the way, the low back pain that I was also having, because it can function the function of like the T7 like vertebrae area. And I had a really congested liver, and I also had really high oxidative stress. So it was kind of no wonder why I was diagnosed with skin cancer when you look at it from that perspective. I had kind of the perfect storm of, that was going on internally that just wasn't showing up on blood testing. So thankfully, through the training that I was going through, I was able to implement lifestyle changes to naturally resolve and reverse those things. So I'm happy to sit here with you and say that I'm 10 years skin cancer free this year, actually.
Congratulations.
And, the funny thing is life still happens. So a little bit later on, like right after I turned 30, I was hit with estrogen dominance, Hashimoto's, and all as a result of having toxic mold in our home. And so, I tell this to my clients all the time, like you never can predict something like toxic mold in your home. So we just have to be prepared and do the best that we can on a daily basis to support our bodies. And even facing some of those extreme type of health issues and stuff going on in my home, I was able to reverse my Hashimoto's within 6 months and to, get the estrogen back under control. And here I am feeling better than I've ever felt in my entire life. So anything's possible, right?
Oh, that is awesome. That's a good story. And just again, you did the detective work,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're helping so many other people through your story and your journey.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations for being skin cancer free. Now, how do you talk to people about sun exposure?
So it's really fascinating.
As I've just you can see a nice redness on me right now. I've just been outside.
Yeah, I just spent a week in Maui, and it's this funny thing because the sun is such an important nutrient in our life, actually, right? When we look at it, it is one of the things that helps to regulate our circadian rhythm, our cortisol rhythm, and the rest of our hormones. Is where we can get vitamin D, and it's also where we get infrared rays to help with detoxification. Yet everybody is so afraid of it. And then we put all these toxic sunscreens on our body to protect ourselves, and those just lead to their own slew of issues. And so, when I talk about, I just actually wrote a blog post not that long ago about how I'm no longer afraid of the sun, because when I was originally diagnosed with cancer, the fear of God was put in me about the sun, and I felt like I had to, basically wear sunscreen all of the time. And I was a really active person, but now I've recognized that the sun is my friend. And I think that you still need to be careful when you go out in the sun, because our, the word is totally escaping me, but the layer that protects us, the ozone layer, that's what it is. The ozone layer is not as dense as it used to be. And so we still need to be careful about our sun exposure, but I do also think that it's important. So I'm really mindful about how much time I spend in the sun, making sure that it's just enough, but not too much. And when I am, spending prolonged periods of time out in the sun, I'm using non-toxic sunscreens. Like I love Kula. And I also love the Hint sunscreen. Do you remember, you were at Mindshare last year, I believe, right? And the CEO of Hint Water was there and talked about her Hint sunscreen.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love it. You can get it on Amazon. It comes in a spray. It's non-greasy, no residues. It smells absolutely delicious. Like the pineapple one that I get, it just makes you want to eat it right out of the can or lick your arm.
Yeah.
But it's great stuff. So I think it's just about being smart, about the sunscreens that you're using and being smart about your sun exposure overall, you know?
Yeah.
And really, if you think about like listening to my story, what made me susceptible to skin cancer wasn't necessarily my my sun exposure, but it was what was going on inside my body that then cultivated an environment for cancerous cells to grow. And so key markers for that were like the really high oxidative stress that triggers like DNA or cellular damage or just aging faster than we should be. The liver congestion that was going on. So my body wasn't able to eliminate toxins and excess estrogen like it should have been able to. The hormonal imbalances, which can also contribute to those things. And then looking at what was going on in my gut with the H pylori and bacterial overgrowth, that's a lot of internal inflammation that my body was dealing with. And so there was just a really big load of stress going on in my body. And, you know, when that happens, you're going to have, like Dr. Tom O'Brien, I love, he talks about like, we all have a weak link, and everybody's weak link can be in a different place. So for me, it showed up in the form of cancer. And then later in life, it showed up in the form of Hashimoto. So you never know where it's going to kind of break. But once you put so much load or force on the body, eventually it's going to break down somewhere, right?
I agree. And back to the sun exposure, there's a lot more than vitamin D we get from the sun. And as your skin can tolerate it, I recommend it, especially early morning, late afternoon, late evening for retinol exposure. You know, decrease the use of sunglasses.
Yes.
You know, it's really damaging to us. So being able to get sun exposure in the eyes, you know, on our skin, on our body, that's really good. And typically the type of cancer we get from the sun is not going to kill us, but lack of sun exposure will.
Right.
And but I'll always checks and balances. And I'm a big one on, you know, putting a rashie on after, you know, like a long sleeve shirt on after you've been in the sun for a while, you know, and everyone's skin's different, but recognizing that. And also, again, sunrises, sunsets, nothing beats that, right? Helping to reestablish their circadian rhythm as well. Now, Jenn, let's go into this esophageal reflux. And you had dealt with H pylori, and tell a little bit, you know, like how you healed from that. And also now we have clients on Prilosec, Nexium, 20, 30 years, and really 8 weeks was the recommended time according to the studies. And we're seeing a lot of nutrient insufficiencies and prolonged extensive problems. So
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about just H pylori first in general for your listeners. And, you know, H pylori is a type of bacteria that resides within the intestinal tract, and everybody has a little bit of H pylori. So it is common, like, and normal for us to have a little bit of these kind of like quote unquote bad bacteria in our gut. They're part of the natural ecosystem. But when they become an overgrowth is when they can become a problem, when issues start to ensue. And so when they start to like overrule the beneficial bacteria, they can create a lot of internal toxicity and inflammation, which can then cause, you know, other issues downstream, essentially. And so H pylori in its manner itself and how it's related to GERD, as we're talking about, is it feeds off of stomach acid. So if you look up, you know, information about H pylori, you'll find that there's studies that link it to ulcers. So it can cause, you know, ulcers. It can cause GI bleeding, and it's actually, there's a ton of studies that show that it's linked to stomach cancer if it's left unaddressed for a prolonged period of time, if it really gets out of control. And so what I've seen in the work that I do with my clients and the cases that I've worked with is that a lot of times people will come to me with, you know, they've been diagnosed with acid reflux or with GERD, and they've been put on something like Prilosec, you know, because the misconception is that they have high acid. But what really is happening oftentimes is that they have an H pylori overgrowth, and we'll see this pop up on a stool sample test. And the H pylori is eating up so much of their stomach acid that they can't actually really digest their food very well. Like they're not able to break down food. And so it's coming back up on them because their body is trying to digest. We have to remember that digestion actually starts in the mouth with our salivary enzymes. And we have enzymes that go all down through the throat into the stomach and then the intestinal lining. And so when there's not enough stomach acid that's happening, the body is going to seek for other resources to help with digestion. And, a lot of in the traditional like medical system, they'll run like a breath test or a blood test to look for H pylori. And I have found that there's no such thing as like the perfect test. So just because you get a negative on one of those tests doesn't mean that you can rule it out. If you're still suffering from something like acid reflux or GERD, then I would suggest if you've come up negative on a breath or a blood test, you still do a stool sample test. We got to look at it from all aspects and really see where we can pinpoint the problem. And people have acid reflux or GERD come to me. We do see it on a stool sample test. It's easily addressable with some, herbs, like really powerful herbs and different supplements and changes of the diet. We get rid of the H pylori. Guess what happens? Their acid reflux and GERD completely goes away. They no longer need their Prilosec or whatever medications that they are on, and they can resume a normal life. Aside from H pylori, I also see those things highly correlated with food sensitivities, or just eating inflammatory foods. So my father-in-law is a really perfect example of this. He had been on Prilosec for, I can't even tell you how long, like probably at least 10 years or something for his. And we ran a stool sample test, sure enough, showed up with H pylori, got rid of the H pylori, he got off of his Prilosec, and then the only time now that he ever has any instances of acid reflux or GERD is when he eats gluten. So when he eats a very inflammatory food or something that he's reactive to, he'll get that response, but then it goes away immediately. But now he can correlate that and he knows, so he can make a conscious choice to not eat gluten most of the time and only indulge in it in those rare occasions where it seems absolutely undeniable tempting,
Yeah, no, that's a perfect example. So food sensitivities causing reflux and that creating these symptoms, right? This kind of creates a rub raw to the intestinal tract and the lining, esophageal lining, stomach lining, and that impairs normal secretions. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly just like the pattern of eating that we have in general can affect our increased GERD, right? So one thing that I love that you emphasize, digestion starts in the mouth with saliva. And so what's happened in America? We've gotten something that is absolutely killing us for free every time we go out. You know what, do you know what that is? Free refills, right? Yeah. Free refills. Free refills are killing us. And the reason is, for our listeners, is that, say for example, you eat a piece of meat. Our stomach is designed to pour acid on it, right? You pour acid on that meat dissolves, it digests. But take that same meat, your body, you're pouring acid on it. You pour 8 ounces, 16 ounces, 24 ounces of your free refills on it. You have diluted those digestive enzymes. So what happens? This food stays undigested or partially digested, ferments, gas forms, right? That increases pressure on your sphincter, and your esophageal sphincter, creating reflux, burning, erosion of the esophagus, and long term, it's creating a lot of problems. So the standard of care is, let's cut that down, decrease the acid secretions, calm this down. When actually there's we need more acid, less fluid. At mealtime, I say, stop 20 minutes before. Begin 2 hours after a meal, especially if it had meat in it, any type of meat, fat, or protein, because that's going to take a while to digest. Yeah. And I have clients in my online programs and in my book, I talk about this in my book, The Hormone Fix, is I have clients after dinner drink no more than 1 or 2 cups of tea before bedtime, because number one, we don't want to get up all night and use the bathroom, and number two, let our body digest and completely dissolve the food that we've eaten as well, right? Yeah, let our stomach do what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. And that, I love that you talk about that, because it is one of the things that I discuss too, is it's not always about what we're eating. It's about who we're being when we're eating as well. So,
great point.
first of all, like when you're taking Prilosec, if you're taking Prilosec, it is reducing stomach acid. That's what it's doing. So number one, if you're on that type of medication, you're not actually solving the problem of whatever it is, you're just masking it. And number two, you're also impairing your digestion and ability to absorb nutrients even more. So you're robbing your body of nutrients to balance hormones and to do the other important functions that it needs to be doing on a daily basis. And, to your point about over consuming and the free refills, I think another really big problem that we have going on in our modern day world right now is this fast-paced life that we live in. So in order to properly digest our food, we need to be in a parasympathetic type of state, right? We're in rest and digest mode. But how do most of us move through the day? Like we're always moving from one task to the next. I know that most of my clients that I work with, because they're busy professionals, they're like, working through their lunch break, or they're making their smoothie and they're jumping in the car and like going to work, and they're not actually allowing themselves to digest. So I think that's also a really important aspect too, is slowing down, recognizing that digestion actually starts in the mouth. And we can look at dogs as a great example of this, the Pavlovic dog that starts drooling when they know that dinner time is coming. I mean, I have a beautiful English lab, and as soon as 5 p.m. hits, he knows that it's dinner time and he's like drooling all over our house. But that is the sign of his body preparing for food, preparing to eat. His salivary enzymes are kind of working up and getting going. His stomach is in getting prepared. And most of us don't really allow ourselves that time to actually sit down and prepare for food, let alone eat it. I know that I grew up in a household where it was always a race to the finish about who could finish their plate first. And so that's something that I've really had to work on in my adult life, is kind of slowing down and not being in that race all the time, so that I can allow my body to digest, the foods that I'm eating, especially for those people out there that are on like a ketogenic or a higher protein type of diet as well, because it takes more to digest those denser foods. And so you have to give yourself that room and space to really sit down and eat and digest.
Yeah, no, great point. And so the process of coming off those antacids or Prilosec or Nexium after 20 years, what would you say that is?
So I think the process of that is, one, understanding exactly what's going on in your gut. And that even relates to what's going on with your hormones. So I always love to run with my clients 2 key tests: the Dutch test to look at hormone balance and estrogen metabolism, because that gives us some insights about what's going on with the liver, which if we're not moving excess estrogen out or toxins out appropriately, that's going to back up the system and negatively impact digestion as well. Also, the opposite of that too is if you have low estrogen, that can contribute to like leaky gut or a dysfunctional digestive system as well. And just knowing also on there, like what's going on with cortisol, and looking at your overall stress reaction or stress burden, so that's a big factor in being able to heal your gut. It's not like a singular approach. We need to understand what's happening in the whole body. And so I think that's a key and indicative test that we can run, and then partnering that with a stool sample test. So I love to run like the Diagnostic Solutions GI Map test to see.
I love that test. I love that test. Mm-hmm.
We can see, what are the bad bacteria? What does the balance of the good bacteria look like? Is there inflammation? What's going on with the immune system? How are you digesting fat specifically? So we can be more targeted in the approach. So once you have a better understanding of the big picture, then you can implement some supplementation, some changes to your diet that are guided by those results. You can take a look at your sleep habits, your exercise habits, and your overall stress load, and start to improve in all of those areas. And so I think that has to come first. Like I would never suggest that somebody just quit their Prilosec or Nexium cold turkey, because you don't have the foundation in place. So, and I'm not a licensed doctor to really make those recommendations anyway. So I always suggest, that the client speaks to their physician, somebody like you, or we're partnering together to manage the medication side of things. But
because sometimes it's needed too, additional, if we have treatment for SIBO, most people who have been on a long-term antacid have a small intestinal bowel overgrowth. And that's challenging, because we can start with probiotics and you can actually feel worse. And so that's something, it can be trial and error, but the GI map test is a great test to look at that and to get a better idea of what's going on. And and what are next steps to figure that out. And exposure is what exposures have we had? Glyphosate,
Right.
pesticide exposures. Those things can really adversely affect us as well. And you also mentioned another big one, mold toxicity.
Mhm.
Mold toxicity will disrupt our microbiome in
Yes.
whatever way it can.
Yes, exactly. So I think that, once you do some of the testing, you can implement a strategic plan that addresses diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation based on what you have going on. And then, you have to ask the question of, like, to your point here, like, what made you a good host in the first place? Like, why did you accumulate this bacterial overgrowth? And so that then goes in deeper to looking at, yes, your exposures. Like, what is dampening your immune system? What is dampening or suppressing your beneficial bacteria that's preventing it from doing its job to keep these bad bacteria, guys, under control? And looking at things like toxin exposures, pesticides, is there potential for mold, plastics in our environment, all the contributing factors. And that's where I really love to dig deep with people. And, it's so fascinating. Like, when I do a consultation with somebody, even before they enroll in one of my programs, we go through a whole health history, and I'm asking them, like, well, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Illinois against farmlands where you were exposed probably to pesticides and herbicides and things like that, that right from the beginning where you were little, this is an accumulation of something that's happened over the period of your lifetime. You don't just overnight get an overgrowth of H. pylori. It's
Mm-hmm.
been something that's coming probably long time. And I always like to say, like, what you're experiencing today is an accumulation of everything that's happened over your lifetime. So really searching back and starting to see, like, oh yeah, like, okay, now I can start to put the pieces together and recognize, like, why I might have ended up here. I know when I look back at my personal story, I didn't know then what was happening, but now that I have this information, I can really look back and piece it all together and look at, like, right from that start when my menstrual cycle was off, that was probably some of the beginning signs of what was going on in my digestive system. And
Mm-hmm.
I was entering into high school. It was a really stressful time. Like, my parents had gone through like a really ugly divorce. I was hanging out with my friends after school, eating like frozen burritos and, trying to like succeed in my studies and all these things. And so that accumulation of stress, and we lived in a farming town, we were drinking tap water. So you can start to see, like, oh, these are all the reasons why or how I ended up in this place. But the cool thing is that it is reversible, right? Now we can start to implement changes to provide a more supportive environment for our gut to flourish, for that beneficial bacteria to flourish, and for us to ultimately flourish in our health too.
Absolutely. Jen, how can people get a hold of you? I told them, for our listeners, holistichealthboss.com is your website, and it's a great website. You've been putting out some great content.
Thank you. Yeah, you can definitely hit me up on my website. I love to put out like a blog at least every week. I try to, with new information on, and tools and tips and resources for how you can tackle whatever's going on in your health. I'm also super active on Instagram at Holistic Health Boss, and then on Facebook at Holistic Health Boss too. And holistic is with a W, just like the whole body or whole foods, as I say. So that's where you can find me, and we can hook up, and I can share some more information with you.
Well, and you do one-on-one coaching, right? You take clients through. So many people are looking for someone or their doctor to help them, and many physicians just don't have the time or the functional background to really help people walk through. And I really want to introduce you to my community for this, because for one-on-one coaching, that's transformational coaching. So you've got the nutrition, you've got the fitness, these aspects, and the whole coaching, the inspirational attitude and language to really help people stay committed to their goals as we change things up. And often we need that, right? Even the best athletes have coaches, y'all. Tiger Woods has a coach, right?
Right.
Even the best athletes have coaches. So Jenn's a great resource for our listeners. Jen, I want to thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
your
you.
wisdom. And I'll encourage our listeners to check out Jenn and do some coaching with her. That one-on-one can really help. Sometimes we need that extra push, that extra camaraderie, or just like, hey, I'm missing a piece. And, in my book, The Hormone Fix, I've put those pieces out there for the majority of things that can really affect us. But I recognize too that sometimes we need some hand holding as we go through it.
Definitely.
So for those of you in my community, the Keto Green community, join me there. And thank you for listening and being here on Couch Talk. And I look forward to seeing y'all next week with the effect, what we've talked about today with gastroesophageal reflux. Sometimes we need those extra digestive enzymes. Sometimes we need a probiotic. I recommend, my gold standard is on my store at dranna.com. So the digestive enzymes and the probiotic that I myself use on a daily basis, because I found it essential, especially when I'm traveling and eating out more than I want to really make sure that I'm getting the extra support I need as well. And so many of us need that too. So check those out at dranna.com and share this episode with your friend. Thank you guys.